Hello and welcome to Clock Spinning, the podcast of Magic's history as told card by card. I'm Austin, and with me, as always, is Connor, my co-host. How are you today, Connor?
I'm doing all right. I'm a little congested right now, as I'm sure you can hear. But happily, that won't be true for most of today's episode.
Bear with us for a little bit of a head cold here. We promise it won't be through the whole episode. Yeah, so on today's episode, we are continuing our review of Betrayers of Kamigawa. We're tackling the rest of the white cards today, so that's another 15 cards. If you're new to the show, feel free to keep listening, or if you want to kind of pick up from the start of our Betrayers of Kamigawa review, just jump back to the previous episode and start there, and we'll introduce the set. We'll talk a little bit about what Betrayers of Kamigawa is, how it fits into Kamigawa block, how it fits into the broader picture of Magic. We'll also talk about the IMPAB rating system we use to rate and review each of the cards. And then, from there, just pick it up and listen to this sweet review goodness.
Absolutely. So without further ado, should we get things going with a Moonlit Strider? Next up, we have Moonlit Strider. 3 and a white mana for a 1/4 spirit. Sacrifice Moonlit Strider. Target creature you control gains protection from the color of your choice until end of turn. And it has Soul Shift 3. Blah. 4 mana, 1/4 that you can sacrifice to give a creature protection from a color. I mean, Soul Shift here is nice, I guess, but a 4 mana, 1/4 just is not doing anything for me. And as we've discussed in the past, giving protection from one color for one turn is just such a small payoff on a body like this.
See, I actually kind of like this thing. Maybe I was just feeling generous after Mending Hands, but I made a little list of things I like about this card, which are 1, it's got a sort of kind of okay combat ability. I think I rate protection higher than you. 2, it's got Soul Shift. 3, he's just dummy thick with this 1/4 body. And 4, it's got this pretty cool brain art by John Avon. I really like the art here.
I mean, the art's okay. I mean, it's sort of this floating brain.
The art's okay. The art looks like something.
It looks like an Eldrazi almost.
It's super Eldrazi-ish. I love the foreground too. It's like a beautiful. It's like kind of like something from Nausicaa. The whole thing.
Huh.
Like, look at the foreground with all these kind of weird flower fungus kind of things going on.
Yeah, I don't know. It's the kind of art that just doesn't stick with me at all. I guess because the kami is so sort of shapeless and there's not really any defining characteristic like I can pick out here. I feel like it just, this could be an instant or sorcery. This could be an enchantment. This could be all kinds of creature types. Like, there's nothing about it that really is memorable to me.
Yeah, it's true that one of the things that does work in a lot of Kamigawa cards is that, like, the name, the art, the flavor, and the mechanics all kind of get tied together really nicely. For this one, it's kind of like this name could exist in any set. This art could kind of exist in a lot of sets, and the effect is like kind of bland.
Yeah, it's just nothing to excite me here. And a 4 mana 1/4 is definitely not going to excite me.
All right, let's just cut it.
Okay, get it out.
All right, let's go to Opal-Eye, Konda's Yojimbo. 1 white for a 1/4 legendary Fox Samurai. Bushido 1 Defender. Tap. The next time a source of your choice would deal damage this turn, that damage is dealt to Opal-Eye instead. 1 white. Prevent the next 1 damage that would be dealt to Opal-Eye this turn. Phew. A lot going on there in terms of rules. Also, a lot going on here in terms of mechanical design and history. Believe it or not, this is actually the first appearance of the Defender mechanic in the history of Magic. Now, of course, this isn't the first appearance of creatures that can't attack. That goes all the way back to Alpha. But for the first 10 years of the game, that was dealt with by a sort of weird mechanic where any creature that had the wall creature type had a special rule attached to it that said it couldn't attack, which is very similar to how in this set they also undid the rules baggage of legendary creatures just being creatures with the type legend and special rules. Similarly, they got rid of the special walls rules and they just gave it a keyworded ability, Defender, which sounds like the obvious step today, but I think it represents a pretty major step forward in the design of Magic in terms of recognizing the larger patterns of Magic card design and sort of thinking about the tools of like type and super type and subtype in a more intentional way. And it's an example where Kamigawa may not have gone down in the history of Magic for a lot of players as in the way Mirrodin or Ravnica did its surrounding sets in terms of power and impact. But in terms of design innovation, I think it stands up there with Ravnica and Mirrodin for really pushing the game forward and coming up with a lot of new ideas that Wizards really continued to mine for the next 10 years, whether that's super types like Legendary or subtypes like Arcane, or flip cards, which eventually became double face cards. Kamigawa originates a lot of interesting ideas. Okay. That's my little historical aside on Opal-Eye. I also think card wise, this card is really cool. So it's just to recap, it's a 3-mana 1/4 that blocks as a 2/5. And that can redirect damage onto himself and then prevent some of that damage. And I think you put all of that together, and this thing really holds down the fort. 3-mana 2/5 is a super respectable blocker. The ability to move the damage around makes combat math hard for your opponent, and I love cards that make combat math hard for your opponent. Oh, and one other thing to say about that is I think there's something very clever in that. Before this, as I said, all creatures with Defender in Magic were walls, and so sort of flavor-wise, they had to be walls. They had to look like walls. Whereas this is a defensive creature that is emphatically not a wall. It's a, thing with 2 legs that walks around. And I think there's a very clever bit of design going on there to show you, oh, here's what we gained by creating this as a keyworded ability. And it fits flavor-wise because Yojimbo means bodyguard. And so Opal-Eye, of course, doesn't go out on the offensive because his job is to protect Konda. So anyway, I've got actually even more to say about this card, but I feel like I should give you a chance to jump in here, Connor. I really like Opal-Eye.
I mean, honestly, there's just a lot of text on this card compared to, so many other Kamigawa cards.
It's like a modern card.
It is. It's like a
2022 card.
Yeah, it's like a card you would see today where there's like 3 separate sort of chunks of text to be thinking about and mechanics that Opal-Eye has. I really like that this is the first Defender card in Magic and the first one that we're talking about here, because it just feels like such a perfect fit that Opal-Eye is this bodyguard to this tremendously important figure, Konda, that he does his job well and is taking all the damage that's coming at you, and like the kind of quintessential defender. I like that he has this ability that you can sink your mana into. He can prevent damage to himself. Not a great raid, but it gives you a way to spend mana later on in the game. And yeah, there's just like a lot of kind of complexity and interest on Opal-Eye that we haven't seen on most other cards in the block.
Yeah, and I think the fact that the prevention is expensive is kind of fine, because I think even without the prevention, at least in our cube, this might make it on its own. Like that tap ability, I think, is quite powerful. You think about, for example, how poor most of the direct damage spells in the set are, right? Like the premier one, Glacial Ray, only deals 2 damage. Well, this basically blanks all of your opponent's Glacial Rays forever, right? You can just redirect that damage to Opal-Eye and he can soak it up because he's got this 1/4 body. So yeah, I think the fact that last ability is kind of expensive, I think he's quite playable even with that.
Yeah, and he kind of blocks 2 creatures too, because he's a good blocker on his own, and then can also redirect damage from another attacking creature to himself. So if he can survive damage from both of those creatures, he's sort of blocking both of them.
He's also an interesting combo with a card we talked about just a few minutes ago, Heart of Light. In that, Heart of Light prevents all damage being dealt to and dealt by, and then Opal-Eye can take all the damage. So, again, I don't think that's good exactly, but it is cute.
Yeah, 6-mana combo there.
Yeah, that's right. 6-mana, 2-card combo that shuts down 1 source of damage every single turn.
Every turn. So you said you have yet more to say.
Oh, yeah, I do. So a couple more things to say about this. This doesn't command many EDH decks, which makes sense. It only commands 40 decks. It appears in 1500, which for a creature with Defender isn't bad. Admittedly, almost all of those are various Samurai themed decks, but that's fine. It's still pretty cool. And I think he also sees some marginal play with some of the Defender, Bant Defender tribal creatures. In terms of running this guy as your commander, basically all the ideas I saw were like these kind of mega pillow fort decks where you like put Pariah on this guy, or Darksteel Plate, or protection cards, or the card Bubble Matrix, which is not a card I'd ever seen before. It's a weather-like card that just prevents all damage that would be dealt to creatures. So basically you just stall and make yourself unkillable and then win with like Felidar Sovereign or Approach of the Second Sun. Again, I don't think that's good, but it does sound pretty fun to me. It sounds like something I would enjoy doing.
Yeah, I love that kind of not really playing Magic deck.
Yeah, I feel bad for our drafters because we both really like the style of
Oh,
not playing Magic.
no. We're trying to enable that.
Something I like about Konda is he has three things. He has a couple of Hatamoto, which apparently means a high-ranking samurai in the direct service of the shogunate back in Champions. He's got Opal-Eye, who's his Yojimbo, and then he's got one Konda's banner. I don't know why that just tickles me that Konda has like three things.
He's got it all.
Yeah, he's got it all, I guess. And then he also has a Yojimbo means a bodyguard, as we said. That's also the name of a really good movie. It's like a good samurai movie from the 60s that inspired a really good Western called A Fistful of Dollars. So, I don't know if there's any callback to this, but I just wanted to mention that I like that movie, Connor.
Okay. Opal-Eye's really bringing the value here.
Yeah, he is. So this is an auto include for me, as you may be able to tell. I'm just gushing about this card, so it's an auto include 1x for me.
Yeah, I've got him at playable, but I'd go up to auto include. I don't think we're cutting him.
Thank you, Connor.
Okay, another exciting one here. We've got Oyobi, who split the heavens. 6W for a 3/6 legendary spirit with flying. Whenever you play a spirit or arcane spell, put a 3/3 white spirit creature token with flying into play. If we were ranking sets based on the names, just the names of legendary creatures in those sets, I think Kamigawa would have to win every time. Oyobi, who split the heavens, is just such a cool name. And I think Oyobi also has one of the most impactful spirit craft abilities in the whole block. Like getting a 3/3 spirit with flying off of any spirit or arcane spell that you play is so much more than I think pretty much any other spirit craft trigger that we have seen or will see.
Yeah, I went back and looked in Scryfall, and I think this is the best spirit craft trigger in the whole block. Like there's some that sort of on paper might be better, like for example, Sire of the Storm, who just draws a card. So it's like, well, that gets you a card. This gets you just a token. But honestly, a 3/3 flyer is just better than most cards you're going to have in your deck.
It's better than most things you'll draw.
Yeah. So like this card's kind of funny where if you don't trigger it, I think it's pretty bad. Like a 3/6 flyer for 7, even in this set is not good. But as soon as you trigger it even once, now you're talking about a 6/9 flyer for 7, which is just like a sort of insane rate for Kamigawa. And then if you trigger it twice, like that's just it. The game is over. So I think this card is like really good. Maybe even like I wonder if it would border on oppressive, honestly, or like if your opponent has this, you don't answer it within a turn or two, the game is just over, and that's in a pretty brutal way.
Yeah, I'm kind of okay with that though, because it is a 7 mana creature.
Yeah.
If the spirit craft ability is not triggering, then its impact is somewhat limited. So I'm kind of fine with like the potential for this to just be completely game ending because it's just a potential.
Yeah, and it does end the game, which is a nice thing. Like one of the challenges in this format is there's a lot of board stalls, and a lot of times those board stalls get broken by like dumb 4-mana creatures like Moloku, 4 and 5 mana creatures like Moloku or some of the Kodamas. Those can feel a little unfair. I think the game being broken by a 7-mana thing and you just winning, that seems kind of fine. You earned it. You got to 7 mana and then cast 1 or 2 thing. Your opponent let it stick for a turn or two, and then you played some more spirit and arcane spells. That seems fair.
Yeah, it seems totally reasonable.
I also like it's pretty splashable. 6 and a W. This can go into a green black spirits deck or a green spirits deck or what. Like this can slot into a lot of places. It can be a finisher for a blue like arcane spell deck.
Yeah. Yeah. The more we talk about her, the more I like her.
Yeah, I also really like her art. It's like I like it. I like all the wacky spirit art. I kind of like that this one isn't as wacky. It's still pretty weird when you look at it. Like her body is just sort of a trunk of tentacles or something, but it's not. It's a little more traditional, but it still looks like a kind of crazy Kamigawa spirit. So I like that too.
Yeah, I like that kind of. Unlike Moonlit Strider or Kami of the Honored Dead, like there's identifiable features here. This is a huge bird spirit. There's weirdness, but there's something to kind of latch onto.
Yeah, the one kind of miss here might be that I'm kind of surprised we don't see any of her token spirits in the art. Like there's some birds flying around her, but those are not 3/3s. Those just look like seagulls.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's quite a miss, but it would have been kind of nice, I think, to see a little more of a nod at the idea that she's summoning other spirits.
Yeah.
Auto include?
I think so. Just one?
Definitely just one.
Yeah.
I'm a little worried even about one, honestly. I could be being too scared here because it is 7 mana, but I don't know. This might be like the best 7-mana thing we've put in the cube.
Yeah, that's not saying much in Kamigawa.
Yeah, you got me there. Well, and I don't think it's less unfair than, say, Moloku, who costs a lot less. So I think it's fine. Also, in EDH, like if you have a slow deck that includes a lot of spirits, a lot of those don't seem to include Oyobi, and I don't know why. Go put Oyobi in there. It's not good, but it's cool.
I know. It's a spirit. Just put it in.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Let's talk about Patron of the Kitsune. 4WW, 5/6, Legendary Spirit, Fox Offering. If you don't know what the offering mechanic is, I'll forgive you because it's only on 5 cards, only in this set. 4WW, 5/6, Fox Offering. You may play this card anytime you can play an instant by sacrificing a fox and paying the difference in mana cost between this and the sacrificed fox. Mana cost includes color. And then whenever a creature attacks, you may gain 1 life. So this is a weird mechanic. It's basically Emerge, but much more limited and narrow than Emerge. And I think that's the reason why no one really remembers any of these cards. It doesn't help that the tribes these attach to are pretty weird. So there's one of these in each color. The black one, I believe, attaches to rats. It's Patron of the Nezumi. The green one attaches to snakes. And I don't actually know, what are the red one and the blue one?
The blue one is Moonfolk, which is definitely a niche creature type. The red one is Goblin.
So that's the only one that's like a relevant tribe then.
Well, I mean, people like rats.
Okay, but Fox is not.
Yeah,
Not a
Fox is
super
not a big
mainstream
one.
tribe. Okay, this card, I really want it to be good, partially because it's a weird Kamigawa effect, partially because the art here is super interesting and strange. It's like it's not that fox-like. It's like a giant, like 8-armed, white, like furry creature with black hands. It's pretty creepy. I recommend looking it up. There's something cool about like flashing in a 5/6 and blocking and maybe like gotcha-ing your opponent. But just I've played with this a few times and it's just never good. Like there's not that many foxes running around. The only one that I really love is Kitsune Blade Master, who honestly is good enough that I don't really want to sacrifice this. And then once you get it, it's just a 5/6, which, it's fine, but it's not really like turning the game single-handedly. I don't know. This is just not a super good card for me, unfortunately, even though I really like it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a 5/6 with a little bit of upside. You do gain a life every time a creature attacks, so that's something.
Yeah, but to me that's like a quadrant test failure of like, if you're behind, I don't think it's quite enough life gain to save you, and your opponent can play around it. It doesn't help you win the game if you're ahead, and it's not really going to like break parity. And so like I don't like, in what circumstances is this super good? Like maybe you power it out on turn 3 or 4 and you get a 5. I don't know. It's hard to see when this card will do what it needs to.
I don't know if it's ever super good, but I feel like just having a 5/6, especially if you can get it out before turn 6, like that is pretty good in Kamigawa, right? Like there are not all that many answers to it, and your opponent's going to have a pretty hard time, I think, dealing with or addressing a 5/6. And then the life gain, I think in more modern Magic, there are a lot of lands will just come into play tapped and give you 1 life here, 1 life there. There's a lot of kind of minor life gain. There isn't that much of that back in Kamigawa. And I think getting that little bit of an edge could sometimes make the difference between winning and losing. And I think just like getting the 5/6 out early is kind of worth something.
I guess so. One thing I do like is, damage on the stack. We haven't said that yet this episode, but, in our cube, we play with damage on the stack, which means that at the end of combat, all the creatures' damage goes on the stack, and then it's all resolved rather than just happening instantly. Which means, for example, you could like put your fox's damage on the stack and then flash in your Patron of the Kitsune and eat the fox, but the fox still gets deal damage. That's kind of cute, I guess.
Yeah, makes it marginally better.
Yeah, marginally better is this is definitely a card of small edges. It's kind of a pity these don't just have flash independent of the offering thing. Like if this just had flash and then the offering thing was like a bonus, I think I'd like a little more. As it is,
yeah.
Otherwise, it's just a 6-mana 5/6 with a marginal ability, which is like, it's kind of like a little better than Visordrix, maybe. Like it's just not a super compelling card.
Yeah. Okay, where do we land on it then? It sounds like you're not super sure about having it in.
I have it as a meh 1x just because I think it could make it, but I I struggle to see it really having any impact in most games.
Okay. I had it as an auto include, but I think that's too much.
Wow.
I want to have some patron in the cube. Maybe the
That's
patron
fair.
of the Kitsune is not the right one because I think we're going to end up probably with fewer than 20 foxes in the cube, which makes this fox offering pretty limited in usefulness. I guess meh. Meh seems okay to me as long as it's staying in for now.
Okay. Yeah, I'm fine with the Meta 1X.
Okay.
That works. I wish I'd thought before, maybe before the blue episode, I'll look into it. But I'm curious what the flavor of these patrons is. Like, are the foxes who are getting sacrificed to this? Are they like disloyal to the mortal realm and they're kind of serving the spirit cause, or does this patron decide to consume a fox on its own? The art of a few of the others, like for example, the Aki shows like a tied up captive that the patron is going to eat. So I think the idea is that some mortals are still like working with these pretty evil kami.
Or maybe they're trying to mollify them.
Yeah, like a King Kong kind of
Right.
deal.
Right.
Hmm.
Patron of the Kitsune kind of has a King Kong vibe.
He definitely has a king. You're right. He's like a King Kong Machamp monster.
I love that.
All right. Meta 1X.
Okay. Let's move on to a card I think we'll have a lot less to say about. Scour. 2 WW for an instant. Exile target enchantment. Search its controller's graveyard, hand, and library for all cards with the same name as that enchantment and exile them. That player then shuffles their library. I really hope that our listeners didn't think that we would get through all the white cards in Betrayers of Kamigawa without seeing some extreme enchantment hate. And Scour is about as extreme as enchantment hate gets. I'm sort of fine with this card in theory, and I kind of like its art, which is just this weird swirl of color. But as with so many of the white cards we talked about in Champions of Kamigawa, there's just no need for this much hating on enchantments.
Yeah, it's a real theme for white of this era. Like I haven't really looked at it in Mirrodin, but I know in Onslaught there's just an inordinate amount of white enchantment hate. And similarly in this set, they just like I think Wizards basically took disenchant away from white and said, no, green gets the good toy now of destroying artifacts and enchantments. You just get enchantments. But white, to make it up for you, you're going to get to destroy a lot of enchantments. Like every set, you're going to get multiple tech cards just for enchantments. And I don't know. That's actually all I can say about this card. I agree. I like the art by Itoku here. And other than that, like this is just an Instacut. I actually didn't even research it because I don't care. I don't care about this card.
All right. Let's cut it.
I know that's not great journalism, but just can't be bothered.
Yeah, I think it's forgivable for Scour.
Wait, no, I have one more thing to say about Scour, which is we talked about it the last time Itoku's art showed up earlier in the block, but Itoku did some amazing art for like 2 years in Magic, like Champions and Ravnica, and then stopped. And I still believe the reason is that a lot of his art got put on these garbage cards. Like he's just turning in this amazing art, and then it's on these cards no one could care about. Boo. All right, Shining Shoal, XWW, Instant Arcane. You may exile a white card with mana value X from your hand rather than pay this spell's mana cost. The next X damage that a source of your choice would deal to you and or creatures you control this turn is dealt to any target instead. Okay, first thing about this, the fish are back. There's a lot of champion spirit cards that have mysterious fish in them, and I'm glad that we are not done with weird fish art. The card itself, super hard to evaluate. That's true of all of these shoals. It's true of a lot of arcane things. And so I kind of had to sit down and just game it out. So my 5/5 blocks your 5/5, just to make the math easy. I exile a 5 mana value spell from my hand. So I kill one of your creatures with that, and save my creature, who then kills your creature. So essentially, I've spent like 2 cards, the shoal and the card I exiled. I saved one of my creatures and I killed 2 of yours. So that's like a 2.1 for 1, something like that. Like it's not exactly, or 2.1 for 2. It's not exactly a 2 for 1. It's a little better than a 2 for 2. Like I think that's, to me, all of that complexity adds up to kind of a meh in a hard to understand card. Like the upside, the best versions of playing this are like really good. They're blowouts. Then I think there's a lot of situations in which this like barely matters. So all in all, tough to evaluate, but I think I like it better than most of the other shoals. And I don't think most of the shoals are very good, particularly in our environment.
Yeah, you're definitely right that it's hard to like say how good this might be. Like it could be used to just end the game if you redirect the damage from your own face to your opponent's face in like the perfect situation. It could lead to some really like favorable combat situations for you, but it's hard to say how often that's really going to come up, and also how often you're going to have the right amount of mana or the white card with the right mana cost in your hand to be able to exile for Shining Shoal to redirect the amount of damage that you want to redirect. So there's a lot of ifs with this card that make it hard to say how often it's actually going to matter.
Yeah, it really feels like a card that's just going to rot in your hand a lot of the time, which is a pretty big demerit. Like, I can imagine a lot of games where this never gets cast because you're just hoping for a situation where this will actually work and it never does.
Yeah, and like you contrast it to like March of Otherworldly Light in Neon Dynasty, like sort of a modern, more modern version of Shining Shoal, where rather than redirecting damage, you're just exiling something. Like that's a card that you can use at all kinds of times, and that's going to be generally relevant. Where Shining Shoal, yeah, I think a lot of the time you're just sort of like getting closer and closer to death, waiting for the right moment to use Shining Shoal, and it's just not happening. I do really appreciate that the shoal of fish in this art is protecting the white Zubera. I think we have to call that out. So that's a plus for me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a plus. It's definitely a minor plus, but there is there is a plus there. A couple other things that jump out about this. So something you said about like nowadays, like March of Otherworldly Light, white just gets to like exile a threat in this case, but back then, like we have this weird convoluted damage prevention going on. Like, I don't know if you all have noticed, but over the course of this review, I think we've already talked about at least 4 white cards that basically redirect or prevent damage. Like, we're in this kind of weird lull in Champions where white is not really allowed to do anything interesting. Like, in 2 more cards, we're going to have another damage prevention creature. There's just like this paucity of white design space here where there's no Oblivion Ring effect. You know, we don't get Swords to Plowshare. We don't get good white removal. They haven't come up with any of the modern technology that lets white get card advantage. There's not that many great creatures because creatures are kind of at a low ebb in this set. So, like, just white doesn't really have a particularly great or interesting identity. There's just so many cards that just prevent damage or gain life.
Yeah, and it's all so reactive. You know, there just aren't that many tools that let you get ahead. It's just waiting for your opponent to do something and then pulling a minor trick on them that may or may not actually help you very much.
Yeah, 100%. Reactive is the right word. Like, reactive rather than proactive characterizes just a ton of the white cards that we talked about today. And I think it is a real design problem. It like in a color that's kind of the best, meant to be the best aggro color alongside red, it's really awkward how how few things there are that let you proactively like sweep a blocker out of the way or manage a difficult threat in order to get through and close out the game.
Yeah.
One of the other things I notice about this is like we're in a really cycle heavy period of Magic design. Like R&D, I think, got really excited about the idea of cycles. And I remember being really excited by cycles of like, oh, there's 5 Shoals. That's cool. There's 5 Genjus. That's cool. But when you look at this set, like there's 30 white cards. There's 30 cards in each color. I believe each color has 5 of those dedicated to a cycle. We have the like key counter cycle. We have the Genju cycle. We have the Shoal cycle, of course. And then later on, we got one more cycle. Where did it go? Oh, and the Patron cycle.
Also.
Oh, and the Baku cycle.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we've got Patrons, Bakus, Shoals, Genjus, and key counter creatures. And I think there's a reason they lean less heavily on that today, which is it really constrains your design space. It means that, like, for example, white is priced into having 5 of its cards have to meet the requirements of the cycle in a way that white's game design at the time just wasn't capable of doing. Like, there wasn't a particularly interesting white effect, for example, here, maybe. Or maybe you think this is interesting, but like, I think this is a general problem of like being too obsessed with cycles led to some sort of stiff, awkward design where a lot of the set is just clogged up with filling out cycles.
Yeah, totally fair.
Okay, so how do you rate this, Connor?
So I have it as playable, but I feel like it's right in between meh and playable for me. Like when it works, I think it really works. And then maybe 70% of the time it just does nothing. So meh is probably right.
Yeah, man, playable. I was kind of on the fence there. I mean, it could even be an Instacut. Who knows? I do feel like we need some Shoal in here. It's like a big part of the block in my memory. And this is, I think, one of the better ones. I think the red one is also okay, but like blue, green, pretty much lock you into 2-for-1ing yourself. Like green especially is just terrible in the context of our cube. So I kind of want to go generous on this one just so we hopefully get at least one Shoal in the final cube.
Okay, should we go with playable 1X for now?
Yeah.
And we'll
Yeah,
see if it is playable. Okay, next up we have Silverstorm Samurai. 4 WW for a 3/3 Fox Samurai with Flash and Bushido 1. That's it. Flash is not worth that much mana to me. That's pretty much all I've got on these Samurai.
Kind of right there with you. I saw someone on Gatherer, one of the few Gatherer comments this card has earned, call this desperate limited filler, and that sounds about right.
Oh man, that is right.
I also think the art here is pretty poor. The composition is really cluttered and confusing. Like we've got 2 figures. The like relative sizing of them doesn't make a whole lot of sense. We got some kind of giant rock in the background that just makes it extra busy. I don't know. It's just like this card is a kind of fail for me at every level.
Yeah, I generally have a soft spot for this artist's work, Michael Sutphin. Like I like his kind of intricate style, high contrast sort of work. This one does not work for me. Like it's really zoomed in on the samurai so that you can't really see anything interesting about them. There's 2 samurai and the one in the back is posed in a super awkward way. The one in the front looks cool, but you can't see anything about her. Just like a couple of hands in the face. Yeah, just kind of an awkward card all around.
Mm-hmm. Is this just an insta-cut for you?
It is for me.
Let's go to Split Tail Miko. 1 and a W for a 1/1 Fox Cleric. White tap. Prevent the next 2 damage that would be dealt to target creature or player this turn. Okay, this is an example of the phenomena we already talked about. White's color pie just feels really diminished in this era, so there's a lot of things that just prevent and redirect and manage damage and life total. That said, I generally kind of like this kind of damage prevention on a stick, particularly with 2. I think it can kind of mess up combat math and make things a little difficult for your opponent. There's not a lot of these creatures in the history of Magic that prevent 2 damage instead of 1. I also like the art. It's kind of goofy. Like his ears are extra big, even for Kitsune. They're like 50% bigger than his or her head. And I like kind of how dark it is. It's like a very dark figure in a very white background, and it's sort of unusual for a white card in that sense. So to me, this is a meh. If you say you want to cut it and you're firm on it, I'm fine with that too. I don't love it, but I think it's okay.
Yeah, I like the art. I don't like that this is probably the 7th or 8th card we've looked at that prevents damage or redirects damage. I kind of want to just cut it.
But well, we already have cut a lot of them though, right? So the effect on the player of the cube will be there's just 1 or 2 damage prevention effects, right?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, if you really like this fox, we can.
Well, I don't say I really like it. That's not true, Connor.
Okay, if you kind of like this fox, we can keep 1 copy for now. It's another fox to sacrifice to the patron.
Yeah, see, that's good enough in its own. Just something the patron can devour.
Yes.
And one you're okay with them devouring because, like, who cares if this thing dies?
Yes.
All right, Meh 1X.
Meh 1X. Okay, we have another creature that I would definitely be okay with it dying. Takeno's Cavalry. 3W for a 1/1 human samurai archer with Bushido 1, and it can tap to deal 1 damage to target attacking or blocking spirit. There was one comment on Gatherer where this card has a 0.8 star rating that I thought really said it all. To have a good laugh, that's all this is good for. The flavor text says, at night he perfected his aim, shooting spider webs by starlight. And then the Gatherer commenter says, I wonder how skillful his aim was before he practiced. Something like 3 tap, Takeno's Cavalry deals 1 damage to target attacking or blocking Avon Trooper. Stay in the night so nobody has to see you again.
Oh gosh, that's harsh.
This is just a terrible, terrible card.
Yeah, it really is. If you just think of like your basic Tim, right? Your basic Tim is 3 mana for a 1/1. So this is already failing the test. It's a 4 mana 1/1. Bushido 1 here is kind of like this text doesn't even need to exist because you're not blocking with your Tim anyway, at least not if it's a 2/2 or a 1/1. So like the Bushido might as well not be here. And then it's like 7 levels of conditional. Like you can only do it on attackers or blockers, which, okay, that's pretty normal for white, but still. And then you can only do it to spirits. So this is just, this card is just the worst.
Yeah.
Which is a pity because I think the art is cool here. I like that it shows like a less stereotyped side of samurai. Like we always think of them with their swords, but if you look at history, a lot of samurai skill was in horsemanship and archery. So I think that's kind of cool that it shows that. And I actually think that flavor text about shooting spider webs is pretty cool. You can imagine that in a movie montage or whatever, but just the card does not live up to that,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
in the movie, it would not lead to a 1/1 that taps to deal 1 damage to target attacking or blocking spirit. I try to think of like the best case scenario for this card. And if you think about the cavalry blocking and attacking spirit, it gets the Bushido bonus, so now it's a 2/2, and then it can tap to deal 1 more damage. Then you're looking at a 4 mana creature that can
3/2.
deal 3 damage while blocking certain types of creatures.
Yeah, it's like a 4 mana 3/2 only on defense against spirits.
Yes. That right there sums it all up. This is
Yeah, it's
so bad.
why is it a 4? Couldn't this be 3 mana and
think it
still
could
be
be-
marginal?
I think it could be 2 mana even.
Yeah, I could see like WW, or maybe like make it 2 mana and make it an 0/1 in that case or something.
Yeah, something like that, and just have this kind of cheap specialized spirit blocker, but at 4 mana, it's just unplayable.
Yeah, and almost all the spirits, there's not a lot of X1 spirits too, so this can't even gun down them. And of course, if there are, they're just not going to attack or block when the cavalry's out.
Right.
Oh boy. Instacut.
Very easy instacut.
Okay, let's go to a less easy instacut. No spoilers. Tallowisp, 1 and a W for a 1/3 spirit. Whenever you play a spirit or arcane spell, you may search your library for an enchant creature aura card, reveal it, and put it into your hand. If you do, shuffle. So I have this in my notes as the coolest instacut. I don't think
love
this
that.
really has. Thank you. I don't think this really has any place like in the cube, because auras in this set are kind of universally not good. But it's just such a cool, unique card. Like I want to build a 60 card deck around this. I want this to be better in EDH than it is, due to the nature of EDH as a singleton format where nothing matters unless it wins the game or generates card advantage. But like this card does cool things. It does cool things with cards like Everstrike from I think it's Eventide, which is a Orzhov creature that loves to wear auras. It's great with Auratog, who's an Atog who likes to eat enchantments. It's great with an Enchantress deck. Like it does all kinds of cool things. It just doesn't have a space in our cube, even though it's like super cool card.
Yeah, I really like it, and I looked at this card and I thought, didn't we talk about this, like Tallowisp working with some other aura in Champions? I couldn't figure out what it might have been. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized there's just nothing. There are no enchant creature cards within Kamigawa that you would really want to get with Tallowisp, even when you trigger it.
Yeah, it's like you get Cage of Hands, the marginal pacifism effect. You could get, what was today's marginal pacifism effect? It's already left my brain. Heart of Light.
Yeah.
You could get Indomitable Will. Like there are a few auras, but just none of them are that good.
Yeah, there just isn't much payoff for doing the work of having the Tallowisp and then triggering its Spiritcraft.
Yeah, it does ask you to put in some work. Yeah, it's hard to know exactly what deck this would be good in, but it just feels like there's got to be a deck somewhere out there that this is really unique and special in. Like this is just such a unique effect.
Yeah.
I also like the art here quite a bit. Like the Tallowisp is some kind of orange. I guess it's meant to be like the essence of a candle flame art. Or like spirit that's just sort of floating around in the art, and it has this cute little flavor text. Isolated on its little candle wick, the Kami never heard of the crime that drove its comrades to war. And I think that's just kind of cute that this spirit is out there living a peaceful life, unlike all the other spirits, because it's just so isolated. It's just living a little charming little hermit life.
It's just trying to get some enchant creature cards.
Mm-hmm. I do think it's an instacut, unfortunately, even though I really like it.
I have to agree.
All right. I might buy like 14 copies in foil, though, because I really like it.
It is pretty. Okay. Next is a card that I think I actually have in foil. Terashi's Grasp. 2W for a sorcery arcane. Destroy target artifact or enchantment. You gain life equal to its converted mana cost. So there's nothing exciting about this card. I guess it's arcane, so you can splice things onto it, and it would trigger your Tallowisp. But as far as I can tell, this is white's only artifact hate in the entire block. So I kind of feel like we might want to keep it around.
Oh, I don't know if I can go there, Connor. Sorry,
you hate it
I'm
too
just in
much.
shock. To me, this card, it might be that I'm just judging this by an unfair barometer, but to me, I just look at this and I go, can't this at least be an instant, or exile the thing, or just give me something? Like 3 mana for a sorcery that gets rid of artifacts or enchantments is just so far below rate. and the life gain is not making up for that to me.
But that is something, Austin. It does give you something.
Well, I know, but
Two
not
life.
something I care about. How about give me some Scry 2 or something, and we can talk about it.
Yeah. I'm not saying it's a good card. I just kind of wonder if white wants it in the cube.
So what are the artifacts and enchantments we're trying to deal with here?
That's a great question. The enchantments. White has enough other enchantment answers. The artifacts, I mean, there's nothing game ending. I think probably, the one artifact that, of course, jumps to mind as being overwhelmingly strong is Umezawa's Jite, but I suspect we will not ultimately include that in the cube. There's some other equipment that you want to get rid of. There's, I think, some other artifacts.
Oh, wait.
You'd want to hit Orochi Hatchery, maybe?
Yeah, that's a blow. Well, although even then, the mana value of Orochi Hatchery is 0.
But you're still getting rid of it.
Boy, I don't think there's a need for this. Like, this is a bad sideboard card, but I don't think it has anything you need to. Even enchantments, like, what are the enchantments you must remove? Like Genju of the Realm, but like the Honden aren't really must kill permanents.
There aren't many must kill permanents in Kamigawa.
Day of Death. Well, there are, but they're all creatures, right? Like the dragons are must kill permanents. Oyobi, who we just talked about, is a must kill permanent, but like this thing ain't.
Yeah, I mean, I guess as I'm looking through the artifacts, there's not too. I mean,
are you looking at the cube list and trying to find one that's worth?
Yeah, maybe. There's some equipment that you definitely want to get rid of if you could, like Tatsumasa, the Dragon's Fang. But yeah, I guess honestly, none of these really look like they need to be dealt with. So maybe it is okay if White.
This is the only answer I have to Hairstrung Kodo.
So can White just not deal with artifacts in the cube? I guess that's fine.
I mean, yeah, I kind of feel like it can. There's no other way in the whole block for White to deal with an artifact?
I don't think so. I think this is it.
I mean, I'm okay with maybe one of these at a meh.
Okay. Yeah, why don't we just do 1x meh? You can have it as your 23rd pick sideboard card.
One more weird thing to say about this card is there's 3 cards in the block named after Terashi. Terashi's Grasp, Terashi's Verdict, and then last in Champions there is Terashi's Cry. Something that's really strange though is we never see Terashi. We just see the effects of Terashi. And so here's what an Ancient Wizards article has to say about that. One of the mightier kami is Terashi, not appearing directly on a magic card, as an aside that feels almost apologetic or defensive, but referred to by 3 arcane spells. Terashi is the kami of the sun, a strong white-aligned force on the side of the immortal spirits. Check out how Terashi slaps around the mortals and their stuff on these 3 white cards. I really like that copy because this card is marginal. Terashi's Cry just taps creatures, and we're about to talk about the final one, which is also not game breaking. And so, like, Terashi is not really slapping around the mortals. He's like destroying their swords and tapping them. Like, Terashi doesn't seem like he's for being a Kami too powerful to appear in the set. I'm not too impressed by the effects of his magic.
I feel like Terashi is just kind of annoying, not powerful.
Yeah, exactly.
Just sort of a minor inconvenience.
You're like, oh no, my grandpa gave me that whatever this. What is this guy holding, by the way?
Sort of an
It's not like a shield.
Axe tombstone.
This is like way too big. I don't know. What is he holding? Very strange.
He's not going to be holding it for long. Terashi.
That's right. Yeah, Terashi doesn't like it. It's going away.
Okay, now 1x. That seems fine.
Yeah, sure. Okay, let's go to the final Terashi card in the history of Magic. Terashi's Verdict. 1W. Instant Arcane. Destroy target attacking creature with power 3 or less. Oh, man. I am not impressed by this card. One of the really weird things in Kamigawa is how conservative they are on rate. So I don't think we've mentioned it yet this episode, but Kamigawa in general is a very low power block. And the main reason is that Mirrodin was an exceptionally high power block. It kind of broke Type 2 and a couple other formats and led to a lot of backlash, a lot of player frustration, and a lot of people just quitting the game. And so Wizards got scared and basically powered down Kamigawa across the board, except for a few cards they missed, like Jite, in order to try to bring those players back. One of the odd things, though, is that seems to apply to cards where that maybe doesn't need to be true. So it makes sense, for example, that they didn't allow the threats in this set to be too good, and they didn't allow for synergies that are too powerful. But it's actually pretty hard to make a broken removal spell, like, apart from maybe Thoughtseize or Path to Exile in their original standard environments, I can't think of a kind of removal, like threat management spell that actually has had a super bad effect on the format. And so I don't really get why they're so gun shy. Like, to me, this card could be viable but not overpowered in any of these ways. It could cost 1 mana instead of 2. It could hit attackers or blockers. It could lose the 3 power or less clause. Like, any of those things would be fine. As is, like, I'm almost at Instacut. Like, there's basically no removal in this set, and yet I still, like, I don't think this is good enough. Like, it only hits attackers, and it costs 2 mana, and it's conditional. Like, come on.
I mean, it is bad compared to the removal that we're used to, especially nowadays in white. But within Kamigawa itself, I feel like white needs all the removal it can get. And Terashi's verdict, there is the 2 mana sucks. The fact that it has to be an attacking creature sucks. The fact that it has to have power 3 or less sucks. But this does hit pretty, like, basically 80% of the creatures in this block when they're attacking. Terashi's verdict can completely remove them. And that's
something did the monster math. Does it really?
80% of creatures in this block have power 3 or less. That's not counting a few things that like start out with less than 3 power and then flip into something a little bit stronger. But yeah, Terashi's verdict can deal with almost everything except the biggest threats. And I feel like that.
Let me do the math for this.
Yeah, makes it viable enough
in our cube. You give me a whole new gloss on this card. I'm still not in love, but 80% is actually pretty good hit rate.
Yeah, I mean,
man, what a weird set.
This is a very like low power set, not just in terms of the power level of the cards, but the like literal power stat of creatures is low. So Terashi's verdict, I think, does more work, a lot more work here than it would in a wider setting.
So I think that's pretty persuasive. I will say the things you most want to remove, this does not hit, right? Like, it's not going to take care of a dragon. It's not going to take care of the big flyers. Like, you're going to be a little bit bummed. Although, actually, I say it's not going to take care of the big flyers, but this even kills Oyobi, which is kind of wild.
It kills Oyobi. It gets rid of Kitsune Blademaster. It deals with a surprising number of things.
Huh. All right, I'm coming around. So where do you rate it, and how many do you think we need?
I have it at playable 2x.
I had it in Instacut, but I'm kind of persuaded. I kind of like your playable 2x.
Yeah, I think 2 is a reasonable number. This definitely isn't going to break our little cube format, and it just gives a little bit more consolation to white in being able to actually deal with threats in a meaningful way instead of just moving damage around.
All right, I'm into it. Let's do it.
All right.
Terashi got a card in the cube in the end.
Okay, this one I'm not going to stand up for. This is Ward of Piety. 1W for a Aura enchant creature. You can pay 1W, and the next 1 damage that would be dealt to enchanted creature this turn is dealt to target creature or player instead. So this card is exactly what I meant when I said that there's nothing good for Tallowisp to tutor up. Like, this card could be interesting if it was maybe just an enchantment that let you spend mana to just redirect damage between creatures however you want. But this is an enchant creature that only lets you redirect damage off of one creature onto other targets at a very high cost in mana.
I like that we each have only 2 comments about this card, and they're both pretty much the same. One is the problem with Tallowisp is it's fetching garbage like this. Yes. And then the other comment I have, which I see you also have, is what is going on with the foreshortening in this art? Like, the guy's hands, his hand looks like it's like 2 feet wide. Like, come on.
It's gigantic. Like, this, I think we've talked about a couple of cards where Greg and or Tim Hildebrandt seem to have just completely missed. And this is a Tim Hildebrandt hard miss.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Tim, but like, this is not how like Kitsune anatomy works.
Or any anatomy.
Yeah, there's just nothing to say in this one.
Yeah.
Easy Instacut. All right, let's talk about Waxmane Baku. Yet another cycle, the Bakus. 2W for a 2/2 spirit. Whenever you play a spirit or arcane spell, you may put a key counter on Waxmane Baku. 1, remove X key counters from Waxmane Baku. Tap X target creatures. I really love this cycle. Honestly, the main thing I love about this cycle is all of them have really strange art. So they have four kind of, depending on the Baku, either animal-like or human-like limbs, and then their body is just like a mass of something color appropriate. So in this case, it's a Waxmane Baku, and so its body is made of kind of like these drippy tendrils of candle wax. And something I noticed in this is that there's really a kind of candle lantern light theme throughout the white spirit cards in this block. We've got this, we've got Tallowisp, of course, just a couple cards ago, Candles Glow, Lantern Kami, tons and tons of lanterns throughout all the sets. So I think from a art perspective, this card is a home run, and some of the other Baku were even better. Design wise, I think this card is decent, almost. Like, okay, so it's basically Gray Ogre.
Mm-hmm.
But I like the way that this accrues value that you can unload later on. And I think the value here is not the worst. Like for 1 mana plus X, you can tap down X things. And that's kind of a close out the game type maneuver. And so I think, a Gray Ogre is never that great, even in Kamigawa. But I think as bad Gray Ogres with good art go, this one's better than most.
Yeah, I think that's all right. I love the Baku too, and I think this stat line, the 3 mana 2/2, is actually pretty reasonable compared to Baku in the other colors.
Oh, no.
Skullmane Baku in black is a 5 mana 2/1. Blademane Baku is a 2 mana 1/1. So like the Gray Ogre is not as bad as it seems here, and I think that the key removal ability here, where you're tapping down creatures, is more relevant than most of the other Baku too. Like this could end the game for you by tapping down your opponent's board and swinging in. Yeah, I think like Waxmane is probably the most relevant one in this cycle.
Yeah, the fact that it's not timing dependent is helpful too, right? It's like you can just let this thing sit out there, gradually picking up key counters here and there. And then, all of a sudden on like turn 9, turn 10, it's like, oh, this has 4 counters on it. That's actually kind of a game ending effect. And I think that's pretty cool. That's an interesting bit of design, and it adds some kind of texture to the play. It leaves your opponent in a position where they're like, okay, do I eventually have to deal with this Baku? Do I need to worry about this thing?
Mm-hmm.
It can also prevent your opponent's creatures from attacking. It's got some of that flexibility where you can use it on offense to clear the way, but you can also use it on defense to tap down your opponent's creatures before combat. So, I think this thing has more play to it than it looks. And
Yeah.
I like those kind of cards that don't appear complicated from a rules perspective, but actually lead to some interesting emerging gameplay. To me, that's like the best part of Magic.
Absolutely. This is also the only Baku to have seen a reprint. So
when did this get a reprint?
And Modern Masters 2015.
Huh. Interesting. Well, yeah, that had kind of a Spirit Arcane theme, I think. Yeah. Huh. Cool. I can see it. So where rating wise, I had this at a meh 2x.
That is exactly where I landed.
Boom. Look at that. Easy.
Love it. Okay, let's close out today's episode with a big legendary spirit, Yomiji, who bars the way. 5 WW for a 4/4 legendary spirit. Whenever a legendary permanent other than Yomiji, who bars the way, is put into a graveyard for play, return that card to its owner's hand. I'll say for Yomiji, I love that we are ending this episode on a higher note than we usually do. Most episodes we seem to end with a really lame or really weak or really dumb card. I don't think Yomiji is a bomb by any means, but Yomiji's name, Yomiji's art, Yomiji's flavor text are all 10 out of 10 for me. Power level we'll get to. But this card, just everything about it except the stat line and what it actually does is just so badass to me.
Yeah, 100%. I like that this card kind of tells or creates a story in and of itself, right? It's like he's this spirit who bars the way. It doesn't say what he bars the way to. You have to like think about it and go, "Oh, he bars the way to death," right? He like keeps this war going and forces all these things to return again and again. And then I don't think you read the flavor text, right?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, the flavor text like turns that up to 11. So it says, "As I died, I rejoiced. I would see my family again. But then I woke up back on the battlefield, back in Kamigawa, back in hell. Kenzo the hard-hearted." Which I think is great. Like, one, it references Kenzo the hard-hearted, who is the flip side of Bushi Tenderfoot, who is the first flip card we ever reviewed. So soft spot for that. I like the little inversion there where Kamigawa is hell. So he's not worried about going to hell after death. He's in hell now, which I think is a fun little bit. And I like the way the whole thing kind of ties together in a way that almost reminds me of one of those great classic D&D monsters where there's not a lot of detail, like the owl bear or something, but there's just enough that your brain starts spinning and like creating stories around it. Yeah, I agree. 10 out of 10, except maybe on playability. But in terms of art, design, unique effect. This is a really cool card.
Yeah, absolutely. Now on playability, 7 mana for a 4/4 is definitely a yikes.
It's a little rough.
A little rough. And the effect here, we started out with a card, Day of Destiny, that was kind of unusually asymmetrical for the time in that it gave an anthem effect just to creatures you control. We're ending with Yomiji, whose effect applies to all legendary permanents. So just as a reminder, what he does is whenever any legendary permanent other than him is put into a graveyard, it goes back to its owner's hand. So that applies to your opponent's legends too.
Oh, I totally missed. I had my Modern Magic glasses on.
Exactly.
I totally missed that.
Exactly.
Oh,
so Yomiji, like a 7 mana 4/4 with that ability just applying to your own board is already marginal at best, I think. The fact that it lets your opponent get, for example, their spirit dragons back after you kill them is a real problem.
Oh dear. Yeah, this card is like outside of our cube even. I think I like this card a lot for like a lower powered commander environment, and I'm surprised how little play it sees. Like it shows up in Arvad the Cursed decks and Captain Sisei and Kethis from time to time, but this is like a super unique effect, and notably it doesn't say legendary creature, it says legendary permanent. So this works with lands, more importantly it works with artifacts and with planeswalkers, which is a pretty amazing set of interactions, but that 7 mana 4/4 thing is just hard to get away from.
Yeah. And I mean, especially when you add planeswalkers into the mix and other, there aren't that many non-creature legendary permanents in Kamigawa, but certainly plenty of them in Modern Magic.
Good.
And they aren't good. Right.
Except for Jite, basically. They're yeah.
Yeah.
I guess this protects your Hondens.
That's a great point.
Got him.
I want Yomiji to work, and I want there to be some super legend heavy deck where you've got Yomiji and you've got Day of Destiny and you have other cards that care about legends that Yomiji's symmetrical effect somehow works in your favor, but it's really hard to imagine what that deck would be.
Yeah, I have this at an Instacut, but I see you have it at a more beautiful build around rating.
Yeah.
And I like your build around.
I want to keep Yomiji in at build around. I suspect, he'll get drafted. We'll play him towards 7 or 8 someday. He'll lead to whoever played him just completely losing the game. And then we can cut him.
I want to live in a world where Yomiji is good enough,
Yeah. Let's give him a chance.
Well, that is it for today's episode. And unlike Yomiji, we will not bar the way for you to continue the rest of your day. Now that we've rendered our Terashi's verdict on each of these wonderful 15 white cards.
Nice.
Thank you. Well, that was really down to you, Connor. Thanks so much for listening today. If you have any thoughts or memories to share about any of the cards we talked about today or any of the upcoming cards of Betrayers of Kamigawa, please let us know. We love comments on Reddit. You can email us. You can comment on YouTube, any old way. We love hearing people's thoughts on the show or thoughts on the cards that we've talked about. If you're not subscribed to the show, consider subscribing. You can subscribe in your podcast app or on our YouTube channel. And follow the Cube, too, if you want to see how it develops at clockspinning.com. Next episode, we'll be back to continue our 7 mana enchantment review. That's been one of our favorite things we reviewed so far, so I'm excited to get back to it.
Should be good.
Until then, though, I'm Austin.
And I'm Connor.
Signing off.